Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Earl is once again taken to live streaming to, I guess, clear his name in public or something. And I watched about, 10 minutes or so of it. I watched his story about his daughter, the daughter who's making the sexual assault allegations. And it's just mind-boggling. He's just mind-boggling. In over two videos, I spent over 2 hours basically going line by line through his first video. I haven't even touched his second video, and I don't plan on it. But every sentence that came out of Earl's mouth was wrong, a lie, didn't make any logical sense. I mean, it was just... I spent over 2 hours to go over a half hour worth of his materials. Crazy. It's just crazy. The man lies nonstop. Anyway, also he currently seems to think that his issue of getting evidence, that his issues with the Deer Park PD. The Deer Park PD turns over all their evidence to the DA. It's the DA who has the responsibility to turn over the evidence, exculpatory or incriminatory, whichever, both, to Earl, or actually to Earl's counsel, his defense attorney. So, if they don't end up doing that, I mean, that's a federal requirement, that's a due process requirement. If they don't do that, then it could end up in a mistrial. It could end up in being dismissed with or without prejudice. I mean, there are various remedies that are available to Earl if he doesn't get all of the evidence for and against him. So yeah, his issue's not with the Deer Park Police Department. His issue's with the DA, and I don't understand why he continually tries to make it about the Deer Park Police Department. I mean, they did their job. Their job is to investigate and gather all the incriminatory evidence against Earl, and then give that incriminatory evidence to the DA to see if the DA wants to prosecute. They did their job. I mean, I don't understand why Earl thinks that there's some beef between him and them. I mean, I'm sure there is some between him and them, but I doubt there's any between them and him. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. So on to Earl's allegations. So he is alleging that at the time his daughter initially made the allegations, when she was 15 years old, her mother was working cleaning as a cleaning service, and one of her clients was a doctor's office. We don't know which doctor's office, but so she would go there and clean nights, and she would take the 15-year-old daughter, the alleged victim, with her. Earl's story is that the 15-year-old daughter broke into a narcotics cabinet and stole psychotropic drugs. That's Earl's word, psychotropic. And would take those psychotropic drugs to help her sleep at night. And he didn't know why a 15-year-old would need psychotropic drugs to help her sleep at night. I mean, I've never been sexually assaulted by my father, but I assume that if I was, I might need a little help to sleep at night. Anyway, he says this went on for about 6 months, and then Earl found out about it, and he had to go to a library to look up what these drugs were. So there's a lot of... Oh, and allegedly, according to Earl, the Deer Park Police Department was withholding this evidence from him. And it proves that Earl's innocent. It shows that Earl's innocent. I guess under the theory that if you're taking psychotropic drugs, you don't know if you're being raped or not. I think maybe he means hallucinogenic. I'm not entirely sure. But he believes that somehow this proves that he didn't do it. And let's take a skeptical look at this, because I know how my audience loves skeptical looks. If a doctor has their controlled substances stolen, I'm going to assume that in Texas, that is a felony. I'm going to assume that that's a pretty serious felony. Now, remember, this was back in the 90s before the get soft on crime approach of current year kicked into effect. The mid 90s was when they had they passed all the harsher legislation against crack and meth and various drugs. They were really cracking down on drugs in the mid 90s. And so it was a pretty harsh climate for anybody to be accused of or convicted of drug offenses. They were taken very seriously then. In addition to being a state level felony, or probably multiple state level felonies, because you probably get charged with burglary with all of its sub counts, with all of its lesser includeds. Possession with intent to distribute. I mean, you could probably get a lot of charges. I've never been a DA, so I don't know how many charges you can get on something like that, but I've seen the way DAs like to throw charges around, and I'm sure there'd be a lot. In addition to the state level offenses, it is a federal crime to steal controlled substances. And the DEA, I believe it's mandatory, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe it's mandatory that a pharmacy or a doctor, anybody who has controlled substances stolen, I believe they have to report it to the DEA, and the DEA will then look into it. So this would be a pretty major happening. And, even back in the 90s, they had security cameras, and definitely back in the 90s, they could probably figure out in less than 6 months who was cleaning, when these supplies were taken. Supply cabinet was intact when we left. Supply cabinet was broken when we came back the next day. The only person here between the time we left and the time we came back was the cleaner. Hey, cleaner. Oh, you brought your daughter? Hey, cleaner's daughter. So none of that makes sense. None of it makes sense. And I haven't seen anything to indicate that the daughter did any time. We know that Texas's version of CPS, I think they might be called CPS, but I'm not sure. Every state has different names for these things. But Texas's version of CPS was involved. But I don't believe that they were involved because of criminal behavior. I think they were involved because the daughters were abused and the home life wasn't as awesome as it should be. And to protect the kids, I'm sure that CPS was involved. So none of the story makes sense from that aspect of it. But let's just assume, arguendo, for the purpose of argument, let's just assume that Earl is telling the truth for once in his life. Let's assume that. I don't believe it to be true, but let's assume it for the sake of argument. If the daughter was on psychotropic drugs to sleep, number one, why is she taking them? Why does she need help sleeping? But number two, how does that at all affect Earl? She wasn't claiming to have been asleep at the time. I think maybe she woke up one time. There's a lot of stories, and they all run together in my head, so I apologize. It's been probably a couple years now since I've looked at any of these substantive allegations. But she was awake when this stuff was happening. I do remember her running to the kitchen and holding a knife until her mom got home to prevent him. One story along those lines. So there's that. That's number one. And number two is it doesn't explain the other daughter's allegations against Earl. I mean, it's not just one daughter making these allegations. I think they only have one who has stepped up to claim to be a victim, but I believe the other one has also given some sort of testimony to the police about the various actions that Earl took, like drilling holes in the wall of the bathroom so that he could peep on his daughter showering. So, I mean, it's not just one daughter. If it was just one daughter, and then he hasn't been charged with this, and so I don't know if there's a proof issue or what, But then there's allegations of him like touching a daughter who was like 3-ish inappropriately. So like fingering her to the point where she got a rash or something. So I'm not entirely sure about or not a rash, but irritated or something along those lines. And he tried to pretend it was diaper rash or something. I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, that's those dark thoughts, and I apologize for mentioning them. Anyway, it's more than one accuser, and even if you knock holes in one, which I don't think you do, I mean that'd be like saying that if a girl had alcohol at a party, she couldn't then claim to have been raped. Yeah, alcohol does diminish your mental capacity and everything like that, but I mean, if he's claiming that she was tripping on mushrooms or something like that, maybe, but he's not. So it doesn't make any sense. It certainly doesn't tend to make him innocent of the charges. It's not exculpatory as far as I can tell. Now, as far as legal analysis, his daughter could theoretically, in addition to the I don't know if Texas has a victims compensation board like California does. California, you can get money from the person who committed a crime against you through the victims compensation board without having to file a lawsuit against them. And having the state collect the money is a little bit easier than trying to collect the money yourself, and it saves you money on attorney's fees and things like that. So I don't know if Texas has anything like that. But if they don't, she could potentially file a lawsuit against Earl for defamation. I mean, he's really gone out of his way to defame her. Now, the problem with that is I looked into filing a defamation lawsuit against him a couple of years ago. He claimed that I was a pedophile. I mean, he claimed that I was a pedophile. And it's just really interesting that like all the things that Earl does, he accuses other people of doing. It's freaking weird. Viva Fry calls that confession through projection. Yeah, confession through projection. Anyway, so he doesn't have any assets that I could find, and I actually had someone look into it, and they couldn't find any assets. So I don't know if maybe he just has them well hidden or what. I did not find a sailboat in his name. I didn't check to see if any of the cars were in his name. I mean, the cars aren't worth crap. If he claimed bankruptcy, the bankruptcy exemptions would swallow those up pretty quick. The land that he's on, I don't believe that was in his name. If I remember correctly, it was in some gal's name. So, like, the dude doesn't have any assets worth anything. So what could she recover? I mean, especially if he goes, theoretically, she might be able to attach any income he gets from YouTube. Theoretically, who knows how much he gets from YouTube? The guy doesn't live high in the hog by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, living in a pull trailer, and oh yeah, he's got an expensive car, and theoretically he has an expensive sailboat, but that's all he has. I mean, he's got, as far as I can tell, nothing else. So her odds of she might win even a nice judgment, but her odds of collecting are somewhat slim. So that's the problem. That's one of the reasons why we have a legal system and not a justice system, is because people with nothing to lose can go out and defame you and just be generally bad people, and there's nothing really you could do to deter them from it. Earl's facing life. What are you gonna accuse him of, or what's the DA gonna throw at him that's gonna change anything for him? I don't think anything. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.